So you want to own a cemetery, buy the land, sell the plots, collect quietly for the rest of your life. Here is the strange part. A cemetery is one of the only businesses on earth with guaranteed endless demand. Every single person, eventually, becomes a possible customer. And it is also a business that regularly goes broke, gets abandoned, and leaves its graves choking under weeds, while the law says the owner must care for those graves forever on the income of a fund they are never allowed to spend. Sell a grave, and by law, you must lock away part of that sale, often 10 to 20%, into a fund whose principal you can never touch again. By the end of this video, you will know exactly how both of those things are true, what a single grave is really worth, and why the most dangerous day in a cemetery's entire life is the day it finally sells out. The buy-in. Start with what you are actually buying, because it is not quite what you think. You are buying land, and a lot of it, usually on the edge of a town, zoned and permitted for burial. But you are not really selling the dirt. You are selling interment rights, the exclusive right for someone to be buried in a specific space. You keep owning the ground. They own the right to rest in it. It is a strange kind of real estate sold by the single space that you can never take back and never resell. Then you build the thing out. Roads, landscaping, drainage, a maintenance yard, and often a mausoleum, a chapel, or an attached funeral home. And here is the rule that shapes everything. From your very first sale, the money splits in two. Part of it is yours to keep, and part of it, set by state law, must go straight into an irrevocable fund for the future care of the graves. You never get that part back, so the tiers look like this. The small church or town cemetery run close to break even. The private memorial park, a real business. And the giant corporate chains, the death care companies that own hundreds of these across the country. Whatever you build, hold this thought. Every single sale you make plants a permanent obligation you can never walk away from. What you inherit a promise that outlives you and everyone you will ever hire. Here is the core of it. You are legally bound to maintain every grave you have ever sold, forever, and you are supposed to pay for that care using only the interest earned on that protected fund, never the fund itself. Mow the grass, fix the roads, trim the trees on the income of money you can look at but never spend. So you inherit interest rate risk in its purest form. When rates fall, the income from that fund shrinks, and the money to cut the grass shrinks with it, even though the grass keeps growing exactly as fast as before. You inherit a finite inventory because you have a fixed number of spaces, and once the land is full, there is no more to sell, ever. You cannot restock a cemetery. Once the last corner is sold, that is the end of the line, no matter how strong demand still is. And you inherit the heaviest regulation of almost any small business. State cemetery boards, mandatory deposits into that care fund, annual reports on it, and licenses that can be pulled if you get it wrong, because the promise you are making is not for a year or 10 years, it is forever. The revenue layers. A cemetery has several income streams, and the plot itself is only the doorway. Layer 1. The interment right. You sell someone the exclusive right to be buried in a specific space. This is the sale everyone pictures, and it is only the beginning. Layer 2. Opening and closing. Every burial needs the grave physically opened and then closed again, and that service is charged on top of the plot, often for nearly as much as the plot itself cost. A weekend or a holiday burial can cost more still, because the crew has to be called in specially. Layer 3. The merchandise, markers and headstones, and especially the grave liner or vault, a concrete box that goes into the ground around the casket, frequently required and sold at a healthy margin. Layer 4. Density. Mausoleum crypts and columbarium niches, the walls that hold caskets and cremation urns above ground. These pack far more people into far less land, at a much higher price per square foot, which is why a shrinking cemetery often builds upward when it runs out of room to build outward. Then pre-need sales, selling all of this to living, healthy people in advance, on installments, years before it is needed. Stack it together and the truth appears. The plot gets them in the gate. The opening, the vault, the crypt, and the pre-need contract are where the money actually lives. Listen to that again. Here is the part worth stopping on. A cemetery's best day, the day it finally sells its very last plot, is the beginning of its death. Think about that for a second. Every other business on earth dreams of selling out. A cemetery that sells out has just ended its main source of income, forever, while its single largest cost, caring for all those graves, runs on forever. Read that again. From the day the last space is sold, The business lives entirely on the interest of its care fund. If that fund is too small or interest rates are too low, the income cannot cover the mowing at all. And slowly, quietly, the grass grows tall, the roads crack, and the perpetual care that people paid for begins to stop. Listen to that again. A cemetery is the only business on earth that dies by succeeding. Sell every plot, and you have sold your last one forever and inherited an eternity of expenses with no new income to meet them. That is why the number that really decides a cemetery's fate is not how many graves it sold. It is how big its care fund grew and how much that fund can safely earn. The ledger. Turn the page to what leaves the account and notice that almost none of it ever ends. Grounds maintenance comes first, and it is the cost that never dies. Mowing, landscaping, and cleanup across every acre, week after week, year after year, for as long as the cemetery exists, which is to say, in theory, forever. Then the roads and drainage, the mausoleum and buildings, all needing constant upkeep. Then staff, groundskeepers, a burial crew, salespeople, and the administrators who file all those state reports. Then insurance, utilities, and the equipment to dig and maintain. And notice the shape of it. Nearly every one of these costs runs forever, while the plot sales that pay for them are finite and shrinking with every burial. The interest on the care fund is supposed to bridge that gap for eternity. When it cannot, the difference comes straight out of the owner's pocket, until one day the owner cannot or will not pay it anymore. The trap. Here is the trap, and it is one of the most seductive in all of business. Everyone dies, so a cemetery looks like the single most recession-proof, demand-guaranteed business a person could ever own. Those customers are not just likely, they are certain and endless. Buyers look at that and think nothing this guaranteed could possibly fail. That is the first half of the trap, because the demand may be infinite, but the land is not, and the obligation is not either. You have a fixed number of graves to sell, a shrinking pile of inventory, and every single sale adds a permanent duty to maintain that spot forever. So the better you sell, the faster you run out of things to sell, and the bigger your eternal obligation grows. Now the second half, because the law only forces a slice, that 10 to 20% into the care fund. A careless or dishonest owner can pocket the rest, sell out fast, and leave a fund far too small to ever cover the grounds. The guaranteed demand is exactly what lulls people to sleep. They are so sure the customers will come that they forget the customers stop coming the moment the last plot is gone, and the bills never stop at all. The history digression. To understand this business, go back to Glendale, California in 1917. That year, a former mining engineer named Hubert Eaton took over a small, failing cemetery that his company had ended up with after a foreclosure. Eaton found ordinary graveyards gloomy, grim, and bad for business, all upright headstones and misery. So he tore up the entire idea. He laid flat markers on wide green lawns, added grand statues, fountains, and beautiful architecture, and renamed the place a memorial park, a garden for the living to visit, not a field of the dead. Then he made the two moves that built the modern industry. He enshrined the endowment care fund, whose principal could never be spent, only its income, as the machine that would maintain his park forever. And he became the first to aggressively sell pre-need, going practically door to door, convincing healthy living people to buy their graves now on installments. So their families would not have to shop in grief later. He called himself the builder. Read what he actually built. Within a couple of decades, nearly every major cemetery in America had copied him. Eaton did not just build Forest Lawn. He invented the cemetery as a modern business. Section: the death spiral. So watch how a cemetery actually dies, because the pattern repeats all over the country. A cemetery fills up over many decades. Then the last plots sell, and the money coming in slows to a trickle, then to nothing. Now the whole place depends on the interest from its care fund, but that fund was underfunded from the start, or interest rates fell, and the income no longer covers the cost of the grounds. So the mowing gets cut back, the grass grows tall, families arrive to visit and find headstones lost in weeds and garbage along the paths. This is not some rare tragedy. In Charleroi, Pennsylvania, That is exactly what happened. A historic cemetery stopped being maintained, families could no longer even find their relatives' graves, and the county district attorney opened a criminal investigation into what had happened to the perpetual care money. It is common enough that entire states keep official databases of abandoned cemeteries and pass special laws just to deal with them. Every grave was sold with a promise of care forever. The money to actually provide that care was not there. The land can never be reused, never be sold, and never just be walked away from. It just sits, a permanent obligation nobody can afford. The survivors. So who survives and how? The cemeteries that last did a few specific things right. 1. They overfunded the fund. Instead of the bare legal minimum, the careful operators pour far more into the care fund, so its interest can actually cover the grounds for generations, not just for a few good years. 2. They never really sell out. They build up instead of out, adding mausoleums and columbarium walls that hold hundreds of people on a sliver of land, and they lean hard into cremation, which needs a fraction of the space. There is always new inventory to sell. 3. They sell the future. They run Eaton's pre-need playbook hard, selling graves and services to the living years ahead of time, which smooths the cash flow and keeps building that fund. 4. They stop being only a cemetery. They add funeral homes, flowers, and services, and the grandest ones, like Forest Lawn, draw millions of visitors a year as genuine destinations. None of that is about hoping the customers show up. It is about funding the forever and making sure there is always something left to sell. The verdict. So does owning a cemetery work. Let us run it and treat this as a model, not a real cemetery. You own a well-located memorial park, you overfund the care trust from day one, you sell pre-need steadily, and you keep adding high-density mausoleum and cremation options so you never run out of inventory. In a good year, fresh sales keep flowing. The care fund grows fatter than the law requires. Its interest comfortably covers the grounds, and your attached funeral home earns on top of it all. This is the version that quietly compounds for a century, a real institution that pays its owners and keeps its promises. That is the good year. Now the other side, you bought a small cemetery already most of the way full, with a care fund that was starved from the beginning. Now the last plots sell, the income dries up, interest rates sag, and the fund cannot cover the mowing. Then the grounds slide, the complaints start, and you are left personally responsible for maintaining a field of graves forever, with no money coming in and no way out. A business that looked utterly bulletproof becomes a bottomless obligation, a field you must tend with money that no longer exists. Here is the real verdict. A cemetery is two bets at once. One is a bet that people will always need a place to be buried, which obviously they will. The other is a bet on discipline across time, that you will fund the eternal promise properly and always keep something left to sell. Win both, and you own one of the most durable institutions in all of business. Lose the second, sell out with a starved fund, and you own an eternity of grass to cut with nothing left to cut it with. So the honest answer is this. A cemetery can absolutely be a strong, lasting business, but almost never as a simple matter of selling land to a guaranteed crowd. It works as a fund you are secretly building for the next 200 years, disguised as a place that sells graves. Fund that promise properly, and it can outlast everyone who ever worked there. Treat it as easy money from certain customers, and the most permanent thing you will ever own will slowly bury you instead. The thesis close. So look again at what you really bought. Not the quiet lawns, not the rows of markers, not the old oak trees, not the sense of a place that will clearly still be standing long after every other business on this list has turned to dust. That permanence is the appeal, and the permanence is the whole trap. You bought a promise that never ends, prepaid to you at maybe 10 or 20 cents on the dollar. Everyone becomes a customer, so the demand feels certain and infinite, but the land underneath is finite, and the duty to care for it has no end at all. A cemetery is the one business that dies precisely by succeeding, that ends its own income the day it sells the last thing it has to sell, while its costs march on forever. A cemetery owner is not really selling graves to the dead. They are making a promise to the living, to tend this ground until the end of time, and funding that promise with the interest on a pot of money they can never touch. Build that fund like it is sacred. Keep something left to sell, and your lawns can stay green for centuries. Forget that the sale was never the point, that the forever was.